Welcome to AEC Stories. This is former SM3 Dempsey. And today my special guest is former YNJ Ortega, Yeoman. And we're doing our typical Sailor Beware and our reviews of other podcasts and so forth. So today's topic is going to be, what would my life have been had I not joined the Navy? I pulled that out of my hat, man. What do you think your life would have been if you didn't join the Navy?
Oh, you know what? Back the town, my hometown that I'm from, people farm. I don't know if, what type of person, you are with your hands, but, I can't do shit as far as farming work or any type of manual labor like that.
I can play Frisbee and I can type really fast. I think the manual labor, I did a little bit of that in high school because I grew up on an Army base. So they'd give us this chance to work and make some money over the summer. They called it summer hire. So we would work for like 2 or 3 months, whatever summer was. And you'd either get stuck. Like one of the crappy jobs I had was working in a motor pool. And we had these crazy Army guys yelling at us, "You don't know what's up." And like they just wanted to boss kids around, just hating us. Go over there and sweep that whole place over there. Sweep all the garbage.
We had something like that type of program in my hometown. Of course, I guess the adults of the community, they wanted to, provide some kind of direction to us young youth at the time. And so they took a show of hands, who wants a summertime job? Well, of course, we didn't want to do farming work. So we're just like, we'll raise our hand. But essentially it was working on somebody's farm.
It's not farming, but it's work on a farm. Right.
And so, we did that for the summer. With a bunch of teenagers and, all together, very little work got done. A lot of goofing off occurred. But, it got to the point where me and my best friend, we were constantly loafing off. And, I expected to get fired. And so I see our boss, and he comes up to us, and I'm just like, man, this cat's going to fire us. Well, he fired somebody, but it wasn't me. It was my best friend.
Oh. And
my buddy, he decides to conveniently throw me under the bus and said, how do I get fired and he doesn't?
Misery loves company.
Oh man, I'm telling you, when comes to graduation and your options are pretty slim in a small West Texas town where cotton is king. If you don't want to farm, your options are very limited.
Yeah. So you could go pump gas, or go pump gas. For me, I had the motor pool job with this couple of psychos. There's one cool guy telling us how he knew karate and shit. This was in the Bruce Lee era. Like, oh, this guy knows karate. And then, I don't know. They just kept, it was just verbally abusive job. This guy was just a miserable, probably low level enlisted man. And, then the next year I got a job working at the supply place. And usually, the main goal for me was to get a job as a lifeguard, because that's where you get to see all the pretty girls and have fun with your buddies and swim. And I was a swimmer. But the supply job was funny because, I'd meet this guy who, I meet these Italian guys, and then they'd have me go work with the Italians while I was bilingual. So the American guy that was running this warehouse, the supply stuff for the Army people, he's like, go work with them. And I'd go to the Italians. I said, he said that I need to take a nap. Because they didn't speak English. So I'd be taking a nap, and then I'd be hanging out with these secretaries, and I'd be helping them out with their punch cards. And there'd be some guys looking at me just hatefully because there was a really pretty secretary and I just made her my friend. And then, she wasn't my girlfriend or anything, but I couldn't wait to get out of there. But I was happy when I became a lifeguard. And before the Navy, for like 3 summers or so, I was a lifeguard. And then I became the instructor for all the bases in Italy, like Sicily, Naples, Livorno, Aviano, all these different bases. They'd send other people to get trained by me and my friend Rosanna. And we would train all the GIs. And that's what I thought I was going to do if I didn't join the Navy. Be Mr. Lifeguard. I got in some trouble, so I had to leave. I joined the Navy. But the thing is, my job was going to be running a rod and gun club lake. It's basically rod and gun clubs are fishing and hunting kind of, areas, that we had our own park and our own, lake and, everything, and just serve up the beers and make sure everything's stocked and all that kind of stuff. And that would have been a good job. I mean, I would have been able to afford a BMW and have money left over because BMWs were cheaper there because I was in Europe, right? Mm-hmm. But since I got in trouble, and I had to kind of sneak out of the country, which I'll go into in full in another podcast, and then lived in Canada for a while, I ended up joining the Navy, but I was trying to join the Air Force. And the Air Force asked me if I'd smoked weed before. And I said, of course, hasn't everybody? They go, more than once? I go, yeah, more than once. And they're like, oh, we can't have you in our Air Force. I'm like, bye. And, my whole goal, because another job I had on that base was working at a TV station. And that's what I wanted to do, work in television production for the Air Force. And they had a base in Berlin I visited when I was a kid, when I was like, 17. And all the nightclubs had the most beautiful women in there, and the ratios were in my favor. And I go, yeah, I'll get a job. I'll meet the perfect woman. I'll be happy. Life will be great. And I'll go to German discos. Yeah. But so I walk in the recruiter and they're like, no. And I see the Army, who I kind of had a sour taste from. So I'm like, no. And then I walk by the Marines, and that drill instructor, which I probably said on another podcast, he's yelling at this fat kid, stand up like a man. I mean, the kid's almost in tears. It looked like something out of Full Metal Jacket. No joke. It wasn't anything short of that. I was like, this guy isn't even enlisted yet. He's got his full head of hair. He hasn't been through boot camp. I could understand if he was a recruit visiting or something, right? Mm. So, yeah, I was trying to figure out what could I do to get to California? What kind of job? Because I dreamed about California. Every movie I watched, every cool kid in my high school was from California. Well, I'd never been there,
When, I had joined a buddy program with, this, idiot friend of my, so-called buddy. And, and I was under the impression that, yeah, y'all going to be on the buddy program. Y'all going to go to boot camp together. Well, hell, I figured I got gypped because this SOB went to Orlando, and I get sent to California, and I was just like, I would hear horror stories about guys that went to San Diego. Man, you're going in the summertime, brother. You're gonna sweat your ass off. And I was like, hold up. We're talking about two totally different boot camps. You went to Marine Corps boot camp. I'm going to Navy. They can't get that damn hot. And he was like, you're a dumbass. He said, the only thing separating the training centers is a fence. You're still going to be sweating your ass off. And I was just like, he was laughing at me, but sure enough, man, I went in June. Yeah. Oh my God. That grinder was hot. I mean, I thought we had some heat here in West Texas, but oh my God, that grinder, you get that sun blasting on that grinder, and you can just feel that heat coming through your, those wonderful pair of Nikes that Uncle Sam gives you.
Oh,
I mean,
I didn't get those. I think I brought my own running shoes. They were good.
You kept yours?
No, I somehow, I think I was allowed to bring my New Balance running shoes, and they were really good. I don't know. I went to Great Lakes, so I'm not sure if my memory of 30 years ago is that on point. But the point of the conversation was, what do you think you would have been if you didn't go in? What do you think you would have become? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, brother, I at the time I really had no aspirations to be anything. I was just wanting to survive.
Right.
Like I said, I probably would have been pushed into farming.
Yeah.
And but it just I don't know. I guess I can attribute to a conversation that I had with two individuals, and these were like, teachers of mine. And ironically, they were both in junior high. I'd met them both in junior high. One guy, his name was, of course, I'm assuming he's dead by now, but his name was Marcellus Walker. Big, tall, distinguished black man. And I guess one day I had messed up on a paper or assignments or something like that to the effect. And he looked me square in the eye and he said, "Son, what do you plan to do with the rest of your life?" And I said, I looked at him, I said, "Well, I'm only 15, I still got
recess. I want to go on recess. That's what I want to do."
And, he said it so matter of factly, it stuck with me even to this day. And I had a football coach, and, of course, I go by Jay, but my real name is Joel. But he would always look at me and say, "Joel," or Joel, however you say it. He goes, "What are you gonna do with your life? Are you gonna be one of them mullet heads?" I said, "Mullet head? Is that some new type of English word I've never heard?"
What is a mullet head? A man that uses a lawnmower backwards. I don't know what that word means.
And, are you going to do something with your life, or are you just going to be a scrub? And, again, I gave him the same answer. I was like, "Well, I'm only 15. What, I still got my whole life ahead of me." He said, "Do something with your life. Don't automatically take the normal path in front of you." Mm-hmm. He said everybody's got their own different path. And I don't know, something with those two individuals, it struck a chord in me. And then, of course, I would always, second guess, when I raised my right hand and, said the oath. And I was just like, am I crazy? Am I losing my mind? And even right from the jump and being in boot camp, I knew it was the right path.
Yeah.
And I needed that kick in the ass, that discipline that I never got from, growing up and being raised the way I was raised.
For me, it was a little backwards because I grew up as a young man with a lot of freedom. In my teens, I could hop on a train and take off and be 500 miles away from home and be making my way through some Rome or Florence or, Pisa or anywhere, or Venice. I could get down. I knew how to hustle. I knew how to persuade. I was a natural charmer, and I was bilingual, and I didn't know this. I didn't realize this till later, right? I didn't know what it was. But I wanted what was good. Whatever good was, I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be well-to-do, because every time growing up, and it wasn't my father's fault because he grew up in a Depression era family. It was tough. It was 7 brothers and sisters in like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, just stuffed in this house in Boston, in the tough part of town, little Irish family, right? And they're just, grinders. His dad was a shoe salesman. My dad was, he was the one that broke away for the family. He was the one that went off and won a scholarship to Boston University, which is a really, prestigious university. And then he later became an officer in the Marines, and then later worked for the government as a Department of Defense. So, he got out of where he was from. They always made it up like he's Mr. Big Time, even though some of my uncles did pretty well too. But I always heard growing up, we can't afford that. We can't afford that. And the truth was we couldn't, but we did have a great life. I was just young, and you're young and you want. You don't need, but you want stuff you don't need, right? And you think you need it. You want to go first class on the airplane. You want to have a Cadillac when you're 16. You want to, you don't need any of that stuff. You'll be happy with a Ford Escort and staying at Motel 6 is just fine, you know, but when you're young, you think you deserve it. Like you got to have it.
Oh, yes, yes.
So I remember a speech sitting there with 3 friends, and we were all a bunch of wild, head banging, hard partying. We started drinking at 13, man. We were playing quarters at 13, 14 at bars. We were chugging, liter beers, which are like 3.5 beers in one mug. These huge, like German, steins. And, we were just like living the grown up life as kids, imitating it to perfection. Right. And we're still kids, wild as can be. And, we say, well, the adults are drinking. We're drinking. We're all doing what they're doing. It wasn't to us. We didn't see a difference. And the Italians weren't chasing after us because there really wasn't a drinking age because no one ever decided to establish it. Because the average Italian kid didn't grow up being a hard drinker because he could drink whenever he wanted. It's kind of like marijuana. Once it becomes so readily accessible, do you think that the people in Amsterdam go, oh my gosh, I can get some hash at the hash bar? No, they're like, who wants that stuff? That's for tourists. The tourists go buy it like it's a novelty. We don't care. We just want to take a walk in the park, ride our bicycle, and have a sandwich. But since it's the novelty to the people where it's illegal, what's, taboo somewhere is different somewhere else. So back to the speech, my 3 buddies, they knew me as a hard partying son of a gun, and I didn't even finish high school. I had to end up getting my GED. I was smart enough, but due to circumstances at home and stuff not always being so comfortable, I just decided to rebel and, not participate. You know what I mean? In elementary school, they wanted to skip me 2 grades. In high school, they thought I was in the slow kids class, but nobody really knew the truth. I did, So I'm sitting there with my 3 buddies. They all graduated except me. Even my friend who was a little bit slow, my best of friends. And he's smart and grown up. He's sharp now as a grown up, but back then he didn't, really focus. And he graduated by the hair of his chinny chin chin. So I'm sitting there and I go, well, what do you want to do? Well, I'm going to join the Air Force and become a pilot. What about you? I'm going to be a helicopter mechanic in the Army. What about you? I'm going to college. I'm going to be an aerodynamic engineer. And they looked at me and I go, I'm just going to be rich, bro. That was my answer. They're like, and they're sitting there like, dude, how are you going to be rich? You're an alcoholic. I go, oh, you're just repeating some shit your mom told you. Look at you. You're on your 7th beer calling me an alcoholic. You're talking out the side of your neck. So here's what happened. Both of the guys with their military path did become everything they said they would and have gone on to do good in life. One of them became a big time scientist kind of guy as well. The other guy, Mr. College, my best of friends, felt, basically got kicked out or didn't pass. So, dropped out of college. But now he's a real estate guy. But for a while there, he had a big struggle, right? So he sounded like the most likely to succeed, like just because. Me, I didn't have a plan. I was going to go teach these lifeguards. I was going to make like $4 an hour. I don't know. But you see, the problem is that I lived in Italy, and Italy's great, but you can't work at an Italian job if you're an American citizen. You're not a local national. You need to be married to an Italian to have the citizenship to work there. Kind of like America with the green card, but America's pretty damn liberal about that. They don't ask for green cards very often, but in Italy they do. So there was hardly enough jobs there, so they're going to check 5 times as much. We have abundance and nobody's looking. So basically, I'm stuck in a country where I can't work except till summertime. And I'm just hustling. I'm telling bar owners, restaurant owners, hey, I'll bring all the Americans here if you give me free, if everything's on the house for me. They go, sure. So I would bring all the GIs down there, telling them that the pretty girls were coming by, tell the pretty girls that the guy that they liked was going to be there. And I would just be a promoter, basically. But I didn't have money very much, but everybody had me covered because I promised a good time and I delivered. I just brought the energy. But what I didn't really realize is I was setting myself up for the future to go into sales. And because all those social skills are sales based, right? And marketing. Right. Consequently, and I didn't know this still, but, and I'm going to segue into one more part and then go back to you and see how you can tie into this. But I was, how did I know I was a salesman? I went to A school and there's a guy who's in front of me and the last billet for California's there. And they didn't tell me in A school that you get to pick your billet based on how you place in the class. I didn't even try, but I was in the 60th percentile. Okay. So I partied every night. I got in good shape. I worked out. I went to the beach, met girls, had fun, that kind of stuff. But I did not really apply, right? So I wasn't the worst, but I wasn't getting to pick one of the 5 billets to California. So there's a guy in front of me and I go, excuse me. Hey, I'll just make up a name. Hey, Johnny, $50 cash. You pick Philadelphia. Come on, man. That ship's in dry dock. You don't even have to go out to sea. You like this shore dirty stuff, don't you, brother? Yeah. Okay, Johnny, tell you what, $50. You're going to give it cash? Yeah, cash right now, man. Give me that California. Concord sucks anyways. I got a family or something out there. I talked the guy my whole life, this podcast, I wouldn't be doing it from California, most likely. I wouldn't have lived in California if it wasn't for my salesman skills. That was the fork in the road of where I am today. There's few things that measure, are you going to the left or the right? Am I going to Virginia on the Med Cruise? Am I going to California on the Westpac, right? So between getting rich and all that other stuff and being a salesperson, not really having anywhere to measure your skills, I think the Navy was the greatest outlet to just take me on that journey, man. I wanted to see the world and figure out what I wanted to do. That was part of it too. That was another good reason to join the military, but go ahead.
To me, to this day, I never regret my experiences. I regret some things that I've said in the past, but I wouldn't change anything. My whole path going to the Mount Hood, and I don't know. I found it a real drive in me. I remember when I signed up and I told my folks, they were like, "Well, where do you want to go?" I said, for me, it's California or bust. Right. And they were just like, well, what makes you think? I said, I don't know, call it intuition or, mojo or whatever. But I said, I'm going to go to California. And my start is San Diego. I said, to me, it's all about that California life.
Right.
And
it was whatever was advertised to us on the movies. We wanted to live Fast Times at Ridgemont High or Valley Girl or whatever movie there was about California. Right. We're like, it's all out in California, that fun stuff. They're not making any movies about Arkansas today. Okay. We got to go to California. Nothing against Arkansas. It might be a hell of a place that I missed out living at. Who knows, man? I got to go visit.
But your experiences on the boat, I think they prepare you for what you encounter out here in the civilian world. I mean, you're going to find all kinds of different types of makeup as far as individuals that you encounter.
Yeah,
and whether that person may be a dick or that's really a genuine nice person that you meet. The Navy prepares you for those type of individuals.
Well, the Navy certainly prepares you to be out of your day-to-day comfort zone. You're moving locations all the time. You're traveling the world. You're thrown on a ship with a bunch of strangers, some who are going to become friends and family. Some are just going to be strangers that you were on a boat with. It's hard to call which way it's going to go, right? But,
right.
And,
gosh, just the other, I think it was last week before last. And, I think I was listening to an old podcast and it got me, back to thinking, whenever, I would have Gunner Stouch on my ass about something.
Right.
And, I was just like, God almighty, what can I do to get this man off my ass? He's just chewing my ass out relentlessly.
Yeah.
And it's like, and whatever I do, whether I'm messing up or, I'm trying my best to do something, I can hear, it's like plain as day, I can hear Gunner Stouch's voice, Ortega, what the hell are you doing? Drag your ass up off the ground and do what you got to do. And I was just like, for God's sakes, I got all kinds of other shit to do. And I got to come down here to supervise you. And I was just like, I look around and I'm just like, I'm freaking out. I'm tweaking or something because I could swear I could hear this guy's voice. And I was just like, you know what? Whether it's from a higher calling or whatever, sometimes I think, that's Gunner's way of, motivating me to do what I have to do in life.
He's in your head. He's like the devil and angel on your shoulder from Animal House.
Right.
The good path and the bad path.
And I meant to ask you, do you think it would be possible if somehow we got a hold of Gunner Stouch's spouse?
Sure. We could have her on. We could have her on here. I don't mind. Mix it up, make it more entertaining, buddy. I'm all about the Mount Hood family, and of course the rest of the fleet too. Now that I started podcasting everybody else, I get everything from NASCAR drivers to battleship people to cruiser ships. I just went buck wild because I haven't had any good Mount Hood people on in a while because everybody's busy with life or whatever. Life gets in the way, man. But everyone's like, I want to hear more Mount Hood stories. I'm like, well, tell your shipmates to get over here.
Yeah, and I've encouraged other shipmates that have been in other commands in the Navy, and I've even told some former Marines. Oh, and of course, their facial expressions are, Ortega, you're on a fucking podcast, and I'm just like, well, why wouldn't I be?
All the time.
And, and they're like, I can't picture you being on a podcast. I said, well, I like to talk. And they're like, well, it's a given that you like to, run your mouth. I said, well, there you go. That's a perfect reason to hear me talk. And I had a buddy, he listened to a podcast or two, and he was genuinely surprised. He said, man, you got some stories. And I said, brother, I mean, it's kind of like online therapy for me.
It is. That's what another shipmate told me from a cruiser. He's like, because he had some rough experiences. He was ultimately on a special units crew, like Swick boat team, and those guys are like they're like the backup for the Navy SEALs. I mean, that's what our friend did, Hillebrand. He ended up being a Swick boat guy. He went through buds and all that, and that's some badass duty. So he was worried that this stuff would bring back some rough memories. And I said, don't worry about it, man. A lot of us got those memories, but we know how to talk to each other. And afterwards he was like, man, this is like total therapy, bro. This was awesome. I go, exactly. That's what it's about. It's therapy for all of us.
And of course, my ongoing struggles with the VA.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, I believe it was last week. This buddy I got, he's a former Marine. I can give thanks to this guy for being the main driving force for staying on my ass and going and getting into the VA. And I'd like to thank you too for answering my questions, which it seems like I have an endless supply of questions to ask you. But
no problem.
If it wasn't for y'all two, I mean, it's taken me a long time just to muster up the courage to go back to the VA. And I just hope that there's guys and gals out there that do have problems like I'm having and continue to have. I hope you do have that one person in your life, or that buddy or that friend or whatever, your significant other, that they do stay on your ass and get you to go to the VA.
Yeah, you get your benefits. I mean, I understand, man. It's like there's a lot of people that have issues that are totally within their rights, that totally deserve the VA help. I'm not here to support any scammers or any trickery or anything like that. I mean, if you have a legitimate cause, like for me, all my stuff was in my medical record. I didn't have to make anything up or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And the same thing, like I took one of my signalmen over to the VA. He's waiting to do his CNP, his compensation and pen. And he got out of the military with a messed up back. He had all the medical records. He'd never filed for it. And, he's a little bit older than me. Imagine. I know he's going to be entitled to probably at least 30%. And his back is bugging the shit out of him. It's been bugging him for 30 years. He ain't got nothing for it. And I think sometimes it's our pride, or it's the fear of being rejected, or going in there saying, hey, and I think it's the label. I think it's the label that you are disabled. Well, because that plays on your psyche. You think of disabled as somebody who's extremely disabled. Like we go from 0 to 100, like, oh, you're going to be missing all your limbs to be disabled, but that's not the case. There's so many variables, right?
Like I said earlier, when I went to the VA, they had asked me, how come you didn't ask for help, when you were still in the Navy? And I was just
that wasn't the culture when we were in the Navy.
Exactly. And I told her, I said, are you kidding me?
We were afraid to sound like a whiner or a weakling, or, we didn't want to be labeled that. We didn't want to wear the scarlet letter, right?
Right.
And truthfully, my stuff didn't really start flaring up till I got out of the Navy. And I still didn't do nothing about it for 20 years, so yeah.
I told her, that initially when I did ask, if I could speak to somebody, I told her, I told her point blank. They looked at me and said, really, if you want help, this is what's going to happen. You're going to wind up being kicked out of the division. We're going to take away your weapon.
Yeah.
Your access to weapons, and then you're going to be put in deck or whatever division.
Of course.
And they're going to administratively separate you from the Navy. And I said, damn, all I asked was for some help or to talk to somebody. And then basically they told me, if you're not going to get any help. If you want to help yourself, go smoke some cigarettes and drink some beer.
It sounds like, and it really depends who you talk to. But when we were in the Navy and, the late 80s, early 90s, that was more the culture. It was be tough, rub some gunpowder on it kind of attitude.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then later today in the more sensitive Navy, that would actually be beneficial to you. They would have got you the right help. You see what I'm saying? It would have been okay to ask for that. But back then it was like shameful. I mean, you would have, and the person that you probably asked didn't know any better. And that's what they were taught. That was like, they certainly weren't a shrink and they didn't know what was right for you. They weren't there to evaluate. They're probably E5, E6, chief. What did they know? Be tough, rub some gunpowder on it. That's what the guy that taught them told them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's like, so you get to consider that circle that you get in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, I'm taking this apart as I talk to you, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, this is what it really is, you know?
Yeah. And it's just, she looked at me and she said, well, you know, you didn't continue to ask for help. And I said, you know, at the time I was 18, 19. I said, you know, I just barely got in the Navy. I said, why the hell? I said, you have no idea how hard it is to mesh and you know, to get in with your division. You know, you bust your butt, you know, hump ammo, and you know, you get to hear all the damn stories, you know, ad nauseum about these individuals, and they become like brothers, you know, brothers to you, and you go through a traumatic experience, and then you ask for help, and then you get told this.
You're not tough enough to be in the tribe anymore.
Right. And I
right.
Said,
that's kind of like that. That's kind of like that, how it is. And it's like, but that's how, honestly, that's how I felt back then. I was all macho about shit when I was a young kid. Even when I was fucked up, I was like, oh no, be a man. You can't deny your manhood. I mean, that was like a bigger priority on my list than understanding my mental health. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So yeah, go ahead.
And I told her, I said, you know, I wasn't about to throw away my whole experience. You know, it took me forever just to be accepted, you know, by my peers.
Right.
And to go through that type of experience of going through Desert Storm, Desert Shield with these guys, you know, we went through all kinds of hell, and we came out like brothers. And you know, and I'm just like, you know what? I'll keep my mouth shut. You know, I don't want to give up to what I worked hard for and earned.
Right.
You know, during this war, you know, and they're just like, well, you know, that's what you're headed for if you continue to ask for help. And I'm just like, I'll just suck it up, and you know.
That was kind of like abusive parent advice. You know, and if that person knew what they were doing today, they would probably feel bad about it, and I wouldn't like want to shame them for it, but they didn't know any better. You know what I mean?
Right.
They didn't know any better, but it's not right. It's one of those things, like you're pointing at a very interesting thing because you have good recollection. I can't pin it on anything like that. It's not a person. For me, it's an event, you know, and that's just what does it, you know. Whatever flipped my switch on, it stayed jammed. You know, I've been, you know, super high alertness my whole life ever since. Insomnia ever since. You know what I mean? No, and it's like, but I didn't think to talk about it with my peers because I wasn't really aware of it. What I did notice, what was weird, is that I would ride my motorcycle as fast as it would go after the war. I get home. I needed to go 125, 130 miles an hour every day on my motorcycle. I would stand up with no hands on that thing at 120. I just wanted more adrenaline. I couldn't get a satisfaction. Like I was looking for something because I'd quit drinking. You know what I mean? And then I'd notice, like, if we went somewhere like Great America, I walked in there with my ex-wife and there was like 300 people. We walked to get, I go, we're leaving. I couldn't stand the people anymore. You know, so something had changed. I just hadn't put my finger on it. But I look back over the last 20 something years and I see all of it. You know what I mean? Right. I see it all. But I didn't, there's no way me, Mr. Tough Guy, Mr. Wog Dog, Mr. fucking bench press over 400 pounds, you know, prepare to be in the Navy SEALs, but never really go because you get in a motorcycle wreck. And truthfully, I just lost the love of the idea. I was ready to get out of the Navy by the time I was fit enough, because there's a lot of training to be good enough for that, right? And so if I'm Mr. Tough Guy, to myself, to my pride as a young man, my machismo, there's no way in hell I'm going to whine to guys that I feel tougher than. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I can't show any weakness. That's how I grew up. You know, I haven't cried since I was a child. You know what I mean? I mean, that's how toughness was built into me. But toughness doesn't give you, it's not bulletproof against things like PTSD and anxiety and some of the things you'll encounter in dangerous situations that will haunt you for the rest of your life. You can have both. You can be tough and be acting like half cocked half the time because you don't know why. And then when you learn about it, suddenly it makes sense. You're either afraid or you're afraid to get in trouble. You're in the middle, right? All right. But there's a lot of shipmates that have some form of PTSD that I've run into that haven't been diagnosed at the VA. I can tell their symptoms, the stuff they tell me. And maybe they're afraid to be labeled disabled, right? Because that's a label. I think that fucks with you. Like, I'm going to call you handicapped now. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Because I still struggle. I mean, with that label, and I've got to talk myself, from that stigma, and it just, I know that if if I have problems with that stigma, I know there's a large portion of sailors out there that have the same thing.
Well, I think if they changed it to injury pay or battle pay or whatever the name of it, and not everybody was in battle though that has injuries from the military. They could have been shore duty stateside and a fork truck jammed them in the back or something and screwed them up for life. Could have been anything, right? The things where people get get VA disability pay, VA medical pay. So if you just say you're in the VA medical program, that's a good way to think of it. But I think the word messed with me in my machismo. I'm disabled. I don't want to think of myself like that. Not because I care what everyone else thinks, but to myself, the way I grew up, because it has a negative connotation, right? Mm-hmm. So, but the truth is, I think it's a handicap. It's a disability. It's something that holds you back from being 100% brand new out of the wrapper like you were when you went into the military. Right? Or as close to
100%. The wrapper might have been twisted a time or two, but yeah.
Well, I feel that if I had not gone in, I'm glad that I did. I'm proud that I did. I love my shipmates. I love the experience, and whatever scar tissue there may be, I'm still happy that I had been in, and I still love the culture. I grew up in it, but I'll say that for a lot of people out there, if I hadn't screwed around in high school, I found out later, you're actually pretty smart. You could have been a doctor. You could have been, stockbroker on Wall Street. I could have been a lot of things, but that didn't steer me in that direction. You know what I mean? But it is a life of adventure, whether it was scary or great or whatever. There was plenty of good with the bad. I mean,
yes. Yes, without a doubt. I mean, go ahead.
It's just interesting, you're filing for your VA stuff like you're getting it, 20 years later?
Yes, a little over 20 years later.
Oh, they're sure as hell not going to give you 20 years back pay,
Oh, no. They made that damn sure. I mean...
right.
Go ahead.
I can tell you this much. If I had gone, it wasn't very well advertised. It wasn't like there wasn't national television ads. The internet wasn't what it is today. Back then in the early 90s, we had dial-up internet. There was very few websites, and there's certainly, the last person to get very technological is usually the government, at least like the military. They were usually slow behind. You know what I mean? So they were going to have a website like 10 years later than everyone, and it was going to look like a third grader's. Now it's pretty good, but it took a while for everything to catch on. Kind of like, I didn't do any online shopping even 10 years after eBay came out. It took years for me to do that. Right. Same thing with the website. So I didn't know that I was entitled to it. There was some miscommunication because I get out on a medical discharge that you need to go to the VA to continue your health care. That wasn't expressed to me like that.
I think it's convenient that Uncle Sam doesn't make people separating from the military aware of that. I mean, it's I don't know for whatever reason why. Because I know when I was separated.
They do now. They do now. Sorry to cut you off there, but they do now. In the last maybe 5 years or 8 years or so, they started to. But they weren't doing it in our time. It was kind of like, if they never ask, we'll never tell. And it's that much money. That's that much money we don't have to give them.
Because if I would have been hip to the game, I would have gone for help a long time ago. But circumstances being that what they were, oh good Lord, my horror stories with the VA are,
I don't really have any horror stories with them. But then I worked in a hospital, so I understand how to talk to them. I don't think it's, the most luxurious. The one, we have a beautiful hospital in Palo Alto. That's beautiful. And we have the little one that I go to in Livermore, which is looks like an old haunted house building. But, I'll tell you, I've got some good medical. Now, some people have some bad experiences. They deal with some people that work there that probably shouldn't work there, that are rude or have poor customer service or no empathy. But, it just depends where you go. It's good over here. I couldn't label the whole, there's probably somebody in another state, maybe Philadelphia, who knows, that's having a horrible time with the VA. It's not consistent across the board. So I guess you had some, I guess, was it filing for your disabilities where you had the biggest problems, or what was it where you had the problems with that?
I got out in 93. And I initially went for a hearing test, audio test.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was like 10 or 20%.
Yeah.
Well, not once did anybody tell me I can get compensation for that. Well, jump forward to here.
You were by the guns. You were by the guns. It's pretty much guaranteed you get tinnitus. Well, you were by the big guns blowing up, dude. I was away from them and my ears still rang.
years later, when I bring this up to the VA is going to tell me, well, that was so long ago, we're going to need to do another test. Well, why the hell do I need to do another damn test if you already did the test? Oh, well, that was so long ago. We need to do a new test now. So they do the new test on me, and it comes back, oh, your hearing's fine. And I'm like, well, how the hell is my hearing fine? How does it go from 10 or 20% hearing loss to I'm fine now? Well, we can't find anywhere. I mean, I'm just like, you got to be shitting me.
Yeah, that's kind of frustrating because hearing loss doesn't usually regrow itself. It's not like a broken arm or a cut that heals itself. Usually permanent in nature.
And of course, I said, well, where do I get compensation for being misdiagnosed with glaucoma for over a decade? Well, Mr. Ortega, the optometrist might have made a mistake. How do you fucking make a mistake for 10 fucking years? I said,
I see your frustration. I get it.
That's, to me, I was like, hell, somebody should have said that about Richard Nixon being president.
Well, that's the thing. What you're pointing out, and I know of other people that have gone through this. You got to be really focused when you're looking at your rights and what you're entitled to. There's not really a clear person, except another vet usually that you'll get at, maybe the VFW or someone will lay it on you, the knowledge, because it's a lot of different information written in its own military type language. And if you haven't spoke military language in a while or government language, you have to relearn this new language to understand what your rights are with the VA and so forth. Right. So a lot of people are entitled to medical as long as they don't make over a certain amount of money for themselves, not for their whole family. They can get some care or at a discounted rate at the VA. Right. And then anybody who served to get out honorably, people get out honorably. Anybody who served, get out honorably or medically, whatever, then they can also get a VA loan. You can buy a house with no money down. And I got a good guy out here that helps people. So if anybody needs help, hit me up. If you live in California, this dude is awesome. You know,
that's how I got my first house, was through the VA.
Well, they have a new program, and this is like, I turned my buddy onto my other friend because I did loans for so many years, but I know a guy who's really good. And,
what's this new program?
Well, the new program is for people that need to refinance, that need to do a cash out. So let's say that you've accumulated like 30,000 in credit cards and you've paid 100 for your house. Now it's worth 200. You can refinance at the rate of a first interest rate, which is lower than a second interest rate, a second loan. So you can refinance your house at like 4% and get 30 grand out, pay off those bills that are probably kicking your ass at 600, you know, a credit card times 5, like 3 grand, clean out all your bills. And your house payment only goes up like $200, $300, you know, but you get rid of $3,000 in debt. So that's the new program just for the VA. And that's pretty awesome. But there's that. And depending on what percentage you have, there's educational benefits for your family. You know, there's a vocational rehab if you find yourself not able to work and you're a veteran and you're having trouble adjusting back to the job. They'll pay to send you back to college if you have like 10 or 20, 30%, I believe. Might, you know, don't hold me to that number exactly. You got to look it up online, but they will send you back to college even if you don't have a GI Bill. They'll pay to retrain you to fit into society. Yeah. I met an officer that was going to Stanford. They were paying for it, you know, but he also had the Pat Tillman scholarship. So yeah. Get his MBA out of Stanford. Imagine that. But it moves at like kind of governmental rates. So there's people ready to go to school. I thought you were going to help me buy a computer. The check didn't come a week later, just because not everything fits into a perfect timeline. They do their best, you know? And then, you know, just, if you have any disability, 10, 20, 30%, usually you get medical covered by that. And that's a huge expense, man. That's a huge expense. I mean, even if they didn't pay us a monthly stipend, hell, the medical alone is worth gold, because as you get older, right? My landlord, he and his wife, they're probably in their late 50s, probably. Their medical per month is $1,600.
Damn.
Yeah. Some Blue Shield shit, right? Imagine that. So just getting the medical, even my mother, who's in her 70s, I think her premium went up and up and up over the years. As you get older, they start raising the price because you get more likely to have more ailments. You know what I mean? It's kind of like putting insurance on a 16-year-old in a GT 500 Mustang.
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying? It's a pretty high premium.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. You know, so that's what it works out to be. But I'm glad you get help, man. I mean, if I'm not going to be fickle about it. If I didn't get off my ass and look for the help, I estimate I probably left $600,000 that I didn't get paid back on. Yeah. Am I chasing them down and trying to sue for it? I don't give a fuck. The time has passed. I'm glad to have whatever help I can right now. You know what I mean?
Oh, exactly.
That's the kind of person I am. I'm not that fickle. I'm grateful. I live grateful for it, even if there's headaches, I'm still grateful for them. I am.
I don't know. It's, I feel really young, every time I walk into the VA, cause, I'm surrounded by a bunch of old guys.
Yeah, man. I kind of look around and I'll go, maybe I'll buy one of them hats with the buttons on it like them, and then I'll fit in. You know?
Yeah, I'm just like, I really don't look so bad. I mean, you know, I come in there thinking I'm fucked up, and and I look around and I'm just like, hell, I think I'm doing pretty good considering the company I'm keeping there.
Well, you see a lot of those old guys, and I'm like, thank God they have medical. And then I look at them, and I'll look at a guy, and I go, he has something Army on him. I go, that guy could have been stationed in Germany. That guy could have been in the Korean War. That guy could have been in Vietnam based on his age. I start placing them in what war and what potential duty stations they could have had, right?
Right.
Then I'll hear some of them talking. And since I was stationed in Europe as a youth, as a civilian, but living on a military base, I mean, like, I got exposure to all of Europe. So I know the Army life. I also know the Navy life. And the Air Force and the Army, they do a lot of the same stuff. And the Marines and the Navy do the same stuff. Same kind of intermingling of bases, right? But
go ahead.
I just, I've seen the world because of the military. And if I was just a regular kid that grew up maybe in Ohio and my dad was the PE teacher there, maybe I would have grown up to be a PE teacher like my dad. That would have been all my ambitions. And my buddy, helped run his dad's pizza shop down the street. We used to go watch the game and, it's like we'd go watch the Reds. I'm not from there. I'm just making a hypothetical, right? And I'd meet that one girl in high school and we'd be married and we'd have 5 kids and, we'd be happy to go to Orlando once or twice in a life.
Brother,
I'm blessed that I joined the military for that other reason, just to see the damn world. And it keeps me moving and looking. You know what I mean?
Well, of course, we all have the hindsight of looking back at the people that, we left in high school, the so-called golden childs or children,
Some of them peaked in high school, and that was the best they were going to be, poor kids.
Oh, you ain't lying, brother. You ain't lying. The good Lord had something different in store for them fellas. But
they're like, I'm going to the top. You're like, yep, the top of 12th grade. That's where it stops. The elevator stops going up. See him working at 7-Eleven, 5 days, down the road.
And the expression that I would get from people, when I was in the Navy, well, so and so, he did this and that, they would look at me, you're in the Navy, and I'm just like, yeah. And and I'm not saying that I'm Mr. All that right now, but I mean, I've carved out a decent living for myself and my family.
You've raised a nice family. I mean, that's really ultimately success is not how many fancy cars you had, but do you have the love and the gratitude and the joy of raising and loving a family? I mean, I think that's as successful as anybody can be. Some people might say success is to be the guy that wins the Powerball, but I would beg to differ. I think it's quality of life. It's love, friendship, and relationships that ultimately dictates how good your life is, Oh,
exactly.
Trust me, I've had the stuff, and the stuff is just gone. It's just stuff. That one, I'll be happy with this red bicycle for the rest of my life. You think when you're a kid, just give me that Schwinn. And then you get it and you're like, whatever. You forgot about that Schwinn about 35 years ago. What are you talking about that Schwinn? I'm just being comedy. You know what I mean?
I was like, I think I used to have a Schwinn or maybe a Huffy.
Huffy was the bike of our era. Remember the Huffies that would have the number, the racing number on the seat?
Yes.
And we get the Huffies and we'd roll the handlebars up and make them look like friggin' goats or stags or whatever.
Or you get some kid on the block, chop up a bike and have like a chopper, bicycle.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a kid on the block. I mean, he would, I mean, I guess he was good at welding, but he would put a blowtorch to bicycles, and this dude, he made a chopper out of a bicycle. And I was just like, I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever saw.
Well, it became kind of hip years later, at least in California. There's guys that have lowrider bikes and shit. I mean, they're really cool. They have this bike shop next to my friend's store over here in California that just makes these super fat tire beach cruisers and stuff that I rode when I go, that thing probably sucks. And I rode when I go, oh, this thing's great. It's now that I'm older, bigger, and heavier. Hell, this thing's awesome. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny that we talk about it now. Earlier this evening, me and my son, we went to the Academy store, and he's been bugging me about getting my bike. Brother, I came across a bike. I thought it was a motorcycle, big ass tires, and he was like, "Dad, this is a dirt bike." I was like, "Is it a dirt bike or a motorcycle?" Yeah, the tires were huge.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh Lord, that metal, that bar or whatever that comes across the middle. I said, I would hate to be the person that would fall off the seat and have to rack themselves with this sucker.
Right.
Because I was just like, good. There's a reason why I don't ride bicycles now. This is a perfect example for it. But
it's the funny things that it's funny what influences us. I was thinking about some weird stuff the other day. This is kind of Navy talk, but I was thinking about things that influence like markers in your life, like signs of the times. If you want to be all, playing Nostradamus. My mother, when I was a little boy, gave me a G.I. Joe. Guess which one it was? It was the Sailor G.I. Joe. Okay.
Oh, man.
Right?
Right.
Now, mind you, I was, I think, living on an Air Force base then, and then we moved to an Army base. I didn't live on the base. In Germany, I lived on the base. In Italy, I lived with the Italians, which we would call the economy. Anything off post was called the economy. And, the Army calls their bases post and the Navy calls it the base. And it's just different language, like bulkhead and all that other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So I remember I got G.I. Joe. And then here's another sign. We moved to Italy. We're living in the economy, the Italian community. And we get a little tiny black and white TV. The TVs were expensive because you needed them to be able to do Italian and American NTC, PAL, and whatever to get Italian channels. Because we didn't have any American cable at all. It's like 72, 73. And I turn on TV and the only cartoon in English is Popeye.
Oh, man.
Yeah, right?
It's crazy.
Later, Popeye starts speaking Italian when they get the dubbing technology and they dub the words over in Italian. He becomes braccio di ferro, which means arm of steel, and I become a sailor that can speak Italian and English.
That's crazy.
But I grew up, right? And on the Army base, you think of the military. All I thought the military was the Army. I'd see airborne jumping out of helicopters, Hueys and stuff onto this big field we had right by our high school called the North 40 acres. Mm-hmm. Right. And, okay. So they're jumping and I'm like, oh, that's the military, Army's General Air Force. And then, we'd go down and see the Navy. We'd play football against them and they were still, the Army was all clean shaven. This was kind of towards the end of the bearded Navy because men used to be able to grow beards in the Navy back then.
Right.
They kind of looked like the G.I. Joe doll. They had the beard. Right. I remember being in Naples, Italy. Everything seems a little more edgy, a little more dangerous. I don't know what was up with the sailors. And all the soda machines you could buy beer out of them. And I didn't do anything that trip. So when we went to Sicily, we went to Sicily, which was a Navy base, and all the soda machines on base, easily accessible to the kids in the housing community. They all sold beer too. So when we went to play football against them, they made us camp in the gym, and we went to the soda machine a lot. I'll just tell you that much. Then another cool thing about the Navy, I'll never forget this. We cruise over to the movie theater. We'd been drinking beer out of the soda machines. And there's some bearded guy running the movie theater. We're like, yeah, we're here to see movies. Like, yeah, go in. Nobody's looking good. We go in. It's like an X-rated movie at the movie theater. Maryland Chambers.
Wow. Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I get so much trouble. I'm 15. I'm drinking beer out of soda machines and I'm watching an adult movie. This is amazing. The Navy is really cool. This is like 1983. Okay. So I know that paints a funny picture. Imagine me being like, 14, 15 on the football team, going to, adult movies and drinking beer out of the soda machines and nobody's looking. But on the Army base, the friggin' MPs, the cops, like the shore patrol, but the MPs were like, They're a bit above a shipboard master at arms and a shore patrol. They were full on police. I mean, a lot of the rest of the Army did not like them. They were the cops, and their job was to look for trouble because otherwise they weren't justifying their job. They were to look for anything out of line. You know, they were hardcore. They were like real policemen, you know, shore patrol. You're just a guy with a nightstick for the night. Or if he had a gun and some training, a little more training. Today, master at arms go to a full school and they're a lot more like the MPs. They're a lot more police trained at a higher level and they have higher, you know, things you can aspire to. Shipboard master at arms, they just gave me a badge, some handcuffs and a big old flashlight to smack someone in the face with. And that was my job. I never had to beat anybody with that big flashlight. But, I guess that's what it was there for. At least I thought so. So shit gets out of hand and the flashlight's going out. But, just think though. That was my impression of the Navy, man. And I was thinking about this the other day. So I got to bring this up on a podcast. You know, people are like, how did you join? Well, you know, like the guy, did you hear the podcast I sent to you the other day?
I haven't had a chance to catch up on it, brother.
What was the last one you probably heard? Last one you can remember?
It's been a while, brother. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean,
Christmas Deep.
Christmas Deep, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
so you probably get 5 or 6 built up or something. Who knows?
Yeah, it's been a while.
You were pretty consistent on them.
Well, I was, but then again, you know, I fell off for the holidays, and then of course being caught up with shopping, and then being sick. You know, I lost my motivation for a while.
You're like, I'll take a break. I'm on sick leave.
Yeah, I was trying not.
Go ahead.
I was trying not to be a sick bay commando.
Well, you're back now, and you know there's a couple other podcasts I got to probably release before this one. I might even release this one this week. I don't even know. I've got a guy that was on a submarine. He's got a great story. That's Chris Wilson, and then I have another guy, Jesse Iwuji, who's a lieutenant. And he was, played on the Navy midshipman.
Wow.
They beat Army every year. He played.
You know,
and he's a lieutenant. He's out of Texas. He's from Texas.
I am kind of disappointed in my midshipman for dropping that game to Army.
Yeah, that was kind of strange, but he wasn't there. That's why. Anyways, Jesse, he went there and became a lieutenant, and then now he's a NASCAR driver, and he's like one of 2 or 3 black gentlemen that race in NASCAR.
Wow.
So just think how unique his trajectory is. First of all, play for the midshipmen. That's like an achievement. Become a lieutenant and then race NASCAR. You know,
that's a stretch,
right? That's like that's just a badass young man. He's 30 years old. I interviewed him the other day. So his podcast will come out eventually too. So I'm sitting on some good stuff, but and then BM1 Zemer came back on, as you remember Zemer.
Oh yes. Have we got any news about Admiral Howard?
Well, Admiral Howard is cruising around the world. I don't know where she is. I haven't been able to get a hold of her. But I do have, this is just a preview for listeners and people tuning in, but I do have feelers out to get Megan Levy. There's a movie out about her in all the theaters right now.
Okay, I remember seeing a commercial. Give me a refresher about what the movie's about.
Oh, it's about, she had one of those dogs that were like a bomb dog, you know, those specialized military dogs for IEDs and all that kind of stuff. And they get hurt and she, you know, wanted to get it back and she fought to get her dog back and they made a whole movie about her. She was over there in like, I believe, in the Middle East serving in danger zones. She was a Marine and, one of our shipmates, well, our sea ancestors, cause he was on before you and I, who worked in Hollywood. He filmed the movie. He was one of the guys filming it. And he used to be a corpsman for the Marines. So there's that. That's how that all comes back to us. You know, going down the line.
I was talking to this guy that he works at the same prison that I do. He's a former Marine, and when I told him about Admiral Howard, he knows about her, and of course, I told him the story about how when she first got on board, she was I had an indirect my little time, meeting her, and I told him my story, and then I told him how she was part of that movie, Captain Phillips, how she actually played a vital role.
She coordinated the attack on the pirates.
Right. And this guy was blown away. He was just like, "How do you know Admiral Howard?" I said, "Well, I tell you how I know her." I said, I was there when she started as an ensign, on board the Mount Hood. And he looked at me. I said, and of course I told him my story about, how she went into the wardroom smelling like poop. And she,
well, she was Chang. She was chief engineer. Yeah.
And
so she was working with all the sewage and the water and everything. Yeah.
And after I told him my little story about her, I told him, I said, that woman you could tell that woman she was a different cat. I mean, she was going places.
Yeah.
But,
it's kind of destined for greatness.
Oh, I mean, she had that, I don't know what you call it, a shine, or, us other people, we might call it shine, or,
glow or whatever.
Mojo, yeah, whatever. But she was just one of those people. But, my buddy, he was really surprised, that I would actually know of somebody or encountered somebody of that stature.
Yeah, it does tend to surprise people when they hear your story. And they're like, huh? No way you were part of that movie of life.
And then, of course, when I tell people that I was stationed in Cuba, of course, they want to, they bring up A Few Good Men. And I said, I tell them Cuba's nothing like what you think.
Jack Nicholson isn't there. Yeah, we have females now. What?
No. And, and I tell them, I said, even the supposed fence line, I mean, it's nothing like, it's nothing like what they think it is. I mean,
right.
But, it's just, go ahead.
That's the thing. It's like some of our experiences are so rich that if you share them with somebody whose life has had no, because only 3% of the people serve of this whole great country, right? 3% of the people protect 97% of the people. So if you look at that, that's all the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines combined. So everybody who doesn't join is in the majority, right? So when we tell them our military stories, they're like, huh? So that would mean like 3 out of every 100 people were in the military. That means 97 people weren't, right? And if you go to some towns, nobody ever was. But when you tell them your stories, it just sounds like some movie you made up. You sound like Johnny the Long-Tailed Liar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'll say one thing, because I'm going to visit my SM2 tomorrow. Maybe I'll podcast with him too. I'll bring my recorder. But, he was there. He was SM2 when I showed up. I was the E1, SR, Signalman Seaman Recruit. And I'd be up on the signal bridge telling these people these stories. That's why I made a podcast about them. Like, I need to give these stories some room to breathe where people can actually hear the people that were there and finally believe them. Because if I just tell them, it sounds like a tall tale, right?
Right.
I'm here to witness what you saw. You're here to see what I saw. And all my other podcast guests, except for the ones from other ships, know everything I say to be true, and vice versa. We're not making it up. It's not convoluted. We're definitely not professional actors. I mean, you working in the, over in the prisons, and me over here in California, and the other guys working at a computer company. It's not like we have time to work on our acting chops. This is just how it is. So, it also tells the story differently, because my civilian friend listens and he's like, Yeah, you guys had that camaraderie. That's what I like about hearing your stories. You know, and it's different than it's a one guy show when everybody's telling it together, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I used to tell SM2 my stories in Italy when I was 19. Him and the other guys, and they didn't trust me afterwards. They're like, "You're full of shit." I'm telling them at 19 years old, "Oh yeah, man. We were at this nightclub in this town called Marostica. It's got a big castle and they play chess, but they do it with real human beings and they have real horses and someone has to clean the horse shit up off the horses on the chessboard." Right?
Right.
Look up Marostica. It's real. Anyways, look it up on Google. Now that Google's here, everything can be verified, right?
Right.
And then we would go to this disco. It was a 3-story, beautiful white villa, all black lights. Your gin and tonic would be glowing in the dark. And you were surrounded by all these beautiful female models that came down from Milan, which is a fashion capital in Italy, to go to this club that had the baddest DJs and the best music and the best vibe. It was called the Shindy Club. That can be verified too now. But when I told this to them 30 years ago, they're like, "Man, Dempsey, you're full of shit, man." And I go, "Wow." So what that gives me perspective when you tell your friends about your relation to Admiral Howard, which is true. I 100% verify that. And you being over in the Persian Gulf, which is true. I verify that too. And so does everybody else that comes on the podcast. This would be like, "Hey, this is the podcast about Len growing up in Italy. It's crazy. You're going to have to listen to everybody to believe it." You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's kind of like how our stories go. Like I just described to you, it sounds crazy me telling you that at 19, right? Mm-hmm. And all you ever been is live in that little town in Texas where farming's the shit. You're like, "What? Nightclubs with models and fucking human chess? What the fuck, liar?"
Yeah. I mean,
That's what it sounds like when you tell, like, "You're in Cuba, full of shit. You're in the Gulf, full of shit." And no one can believe that because they never dared or imagined to do it.
You know,
they're like, they think you should be more famous or be rich because you did that or something.
You know, it's like, growing up in that small West Texas town and getting to high school and when you, in history class, you read about the new battleship New Jersey. Never in a million years would I have thought one day I'm going to see her and see her fire her guns off. And, of course, I would tell people I got to see the New Jersey fire her guns off. Like, "Ortega, get the hell out of my face. You didn't see shit."
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll be damned if I didn't see that old gal shoot her guns off. And,
New Jersey and the Missouri, I think.
Was it New Jersey or the Missouri? I'm sorry.
I think it was the Missouri. It's okay. Doesn't matter. They're both the same kind of ship.
Okay.
Yeah,
the Missouri. This is Missouri, right? Yeah, Missouri. And
there's actual video footage from the Mount Hood of that ship. It was us doing unrep with them. And on the AEC story page, if you look it up on Facebook, there's video of that.
And I told him I did see the Mighty Mo shoot her guns off. And "Get the hell out of my face." And I said, "You know what? That is floating history right there."
Yeah.
I said, never in a million years would I have, even begin to think that I would see that old girl, in the water shooting them big ass guns of hers and delivering a powerful message to the enemy.
And that's what it's about, though. I mean, you see, people, they hear what we lived, and it sounds fantastical. Like it would be like if you met some prince that had his own island and 500 wives and a flying car, and he really did have it, but he's telling you about it. You're like, "I don't know, man. That might be. I don't know about the flying car and 500 wives. Are you sure?" It sounds like a stretch, but there's probably some guy that has that. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe.
It's just, like you said, the camaraderie, with other fellow sailors or other military personnel. You just can't make up that shit. I mean, of course, we've talked in the past about, bullshit, professional bullshitters, that want to pass themselves on as something that they're not. And you can tell, I mean, from the jump that people that are trying to bullshit you.
Pretty much. See, the difference is now everybody has Google, and if somebody sounds like they're full of hot air, you can verify it. And the same thing with the podcast. I mean, we're telling history, we're leaving it as it really is. This has never been done before in history. Everything else in the past, no bunch of soldiers or sailors got together and said, let's document our history. No, they're like, we'll let A&E do it. That guy's going to get a third-hand story and chop it up 2 times and deliver it very generically to the surface. But this is us talking, cussing, expressing ourselves, telling you how it is and giving you the aftermath, and this is the director's cut of the real life experience, and that's what the podcast is amazing that way, and it's only going to keep going. I'm not stopping.
Oh, without a doubt, I would encourage you, and I'd like to put my 2 cents in there too, as much as possible. It's great therapy, brother. I mean, you got me pumped up. I mean, I was excited, that you wanted me to do another podcast with you. I was telling people, brother, I got something to do this week, and they were like, "What are you gonna do? You gonna do a podcast?" I said, "Yeah." Get the hell out of here. You don't know nothing about no podcast. And I said, don't let this distorted look on my face, fool you. I just, I told him, I'm number 1 with a bullet on this podcast.
That's right.
And
that's right. Here's some of the most listened to episodes, actually. So there that goes.
Of course, I'm bragging, of course, but it's, it to me, it's a sense of empowerment. I mean, gosh, I'm happy to say that, I'm part of the podcast, and, I like to encourage other sailors out there or other, former military personnel. You've interviewed Army personnel too, right?
Well, I have a potential Special Forces gentleman that I'll be bringing on, and look forward to it. He's a buddy I made over through the VA, and he's cool. I've had Marines, I've had sailors, I've had submarine sailors, I've had cruiser sailors, battleship sailors, people that have served on carriers, and AE sailors for sure. So yeah, I'm trying to round out the Navy, and I've had a couple of special boat unit guys, which is an aspect of Special Forces now, SBU and SWIC. So yeah, they have more military combat training. And one of the corpsman guys, he used to serve with like the, badass Marine units out in the field,
Right. Gosh, I was also, have you heard any word about, Mind Doc coming on the podcast?
Well, she's talked about it, but she hasn't been about it yet. When she wants to get up, I'm here. I've offered it to her a couple times, but my new mojo with the podcast is if you're game, let's do it. I'm not going to ask you twice. There's a lot of people. Yeah. Tomorrow. That's the hard part about doing a podcast is being consistent and booking people. So in the last week, this is like my 4th podcast. I've released 1 of them, but now I have 3 weeks of podcasts backed up, which I want. If I get a couple more, then I'll start releasing 2 a week again. But I felt like some people were saying, hey, I can't even finish them all. You know what I mean? So I'm like, let me let people start digesting them. I mean, and even if I don't release them over time, I notice the numbers start ticking up because either people discover them. We're on Spotify now.
Yeah. I was tripping out that the other day when you were telling me that you're on Spotify now.
Yeah. So are you. We're on Spotify.
It's a great service.
Yeah.
But I'd like to encourage Miss Mondoc, Dorothy, if you're listening. you're more qualified than anybody that I know to to speak about Veterans Affairs and helping out your fellow sailors. It would be great to hear from you again, and I'm sure all the other Mount Hood.
I'd love to have some Mount Hood females on board, but they haven't exactly been putting their hands up and volunteering, so I'll leave it up to them. I think some of them might think that this is like, because I'm from the old school all man Navy, that I might have that tilt, but I'm open, dude. I'm open. I mean, I want females that have served as much as I want males. There's not I don't discriminate at all,
Hey, you've had anywhere from deck, engineering, weapons, admin.
Yeah.
I mean, officers. I mean,
yeah. Marines. Marines and submarines.
It's
definitely a yeoman. The yeoman, the submarine guy was a yeoman too, by the way.
Oh, fellow pinhead.
Yeah. So you and Tony and him. I got 3 yeomen, man. I'm yeomaned up.
Exactly. But what was I going to tell you? But I like to encourage other fellow manhood people. Hanson, if you're listening, brother, I would love for you to come on board and throw a podcast down. And enlighten these individuals out there to your classic annex. Because he's got stories that would rival anybody's stories.
Oh yeah. I've been trying to get him, man. That's a busy kid though. He's working 40-something-year-old kid. He's busy working 2 jobs, man. He's a firefighter and a full-time electrician. So he'll go from 3 days on to 3 days on, back to back.
And I encourage, people out there to, if you're having troubles out there, to go to the VA. I'm the last person to say that, I didn't have my struggles with the VA, but I was lucky to have someone stay on my ass and push me to go to the VA and seek out help. And I'm starting to get that help now. It might have been years after the fact, but I am getting help, and I hope to continue my therapy. And
I think a lot of us didn't chase it down because we were preoccupied by just trying to get our life in order. We didn't have time to pull over and take care of ourselves. It's like your health. It's the first thing to go, and it's the last thing you think about.
Right.
So, your mental health as well. But you don't want to think of yourself like that, so you don't address it, and you just drag through life, and you wonder why you've been divorced 3 times. You're in this vicious merry-go-round, and you don't know why the ride always ends up crashing into the wall.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And you're like, something ain't right here, but it ain't me. But I'm making light of it, but it's like that. It's really like that, man. It's not even that funny.
I like to encourage, all my fellow veterans out there that are listening to seek that help. I mean, you're never too big of an individual to ask for help, and to me, it doesn't matter who judges you anymore. I mean, I think I'm at that certain age now where pride be damned. I want to help myself. I mean, it's about time that I looked after myself, because we're married, we got kids, we're always putting their concerns over ours. Help yourself out. Get help.
Well, you can't help your kids if you're not taking care of yourself.
Exactly.
And if you notice that you have had trouble sleeping, you've had other issues, divorces, problems with drugs and alcohol, and it coincides with your time in the military, there's a good chance that you might have some form of PTSD. And they have tests that you can take. And I recommend that you talk to your veteran service officer if you feel any of this is. And if you hurt yourself, whether it be a shin bone or a knee or an elbow or a back problem that's been nagging you ever since the military, And when you're young, you just keep thinking it's going to get better. Then, as time goes on, you forgot where you got it till you remember, oh yeah, that happened in the Navy when that crane hit me in the neck, knocked me on my ass, and I was out for 2 days, and then my neck hurt, but it's never stopped since then. Oh, you mean I can go to the VA? I'm just making up an example. Oh, I can go to the VA? That's what I'm saying. I'm making light of this shit because that's the kind of problem.
The fucking crane. Oh my God. I was going to say.
I'm making light of it because people are like,
oh my God.
That time you're going up the ladder and someone threw a sea bag in your face, hit you in the chin. You've been talking funny ever since. Go check it out.
The good old sea bag in the face trick.
Yeah, the good old sea bag and the tea bag. But well, I just want more people to check us out. Please give us reviews on let us know what you like. Any encouraging comments, we'd love to hear them because we like doing these for you. I have people that tell me they enjoy it a lot. They don't always post it on Podbean. We're at AECstories at podbean.com. If you look us up on Podbean.
Bean?
Yeah. Bean, like beans and rice. Podbean.
I'm a hick. I mean, when you say bean, I keep on thinking that you're saying beam.
It's hard to distinguish N and M through the microphone. But I'll tell you this. Podbean.com. It's AEC Stories. Leave us a review on there on the podcast, any podcast that you like. Or leave us a review on our Facebook page on AEC Stories. Or on Stitcher.com, AEC Stories. Look us up there.
Stitcher?
Yeah, Stitcher. We're on Stitcher. Or on Spotify. I don't know if they let you leave reviews, but Spotify, you can listen to us there. And iTunes, leave us a review there. That really helps us out. I'm not telling you to go to all 7 places. I'm just saying whichever one of those mediums, please do that. It helps us grow this podcast, and it helps a lot of veterans, and it'll help their families to listen to their dads and their moms when they've been on this podcast years later. They'll know where to find us. This is just going to be a treasure chest. When I get 100, 200 episodes in, people are going to find it one day, and the listenership's going to go through the roof. Not because I believe we're the next Sons of Anarchy. It's more like people like to hear, oh, that was my uncle. That was my dad. That was my brother. They want to hear that story,
Exactly.
And, send your friends to us. If you get a good veteran that's got a great sea story, especially a sailor, we'll listen to a foxhole story from an Army guy, or sitting on a nice base playing golf from an Air Force guy, being sarcastic there, or another foxhole story from a Marine, or a shipboard foxhole story from a Marine. We'd love to listen to all your stuff, and tune in for our next one. Okay, hang on. And tune in for our next one. Okay, hang on.